Well, thank you, Chris, for hosting this program tonight. Thanks for that kind introduction. And the idea we had for tonight, you may know or you may be following and reading each month at Chris's website, liberato.us. We publish a newsletter that I compile of incidences related to women in the world, all over the world, caught under Sharia regimes. And so we thought we would put together a entire presentation for you tonight that kind of summarizes. It won't cover everything that you'll see at the newsletter, by the way, which comes out. We put that one out towards the end of each month, 20 or 22 of the month. We can't cover everything that's in there, but I recommend you go there. Again, liberato.us and the tab for women under Sharia. But I will cover tonight a few things. I want to start with what is the doctrinal basis within Islam for the treatment of women under Sharia. And then I'll give you some specific examples in different places around the world. And we'll conclude with right here in the United States and what we have already here infiltrated into our own homeland and system. So let's begin then. The first page here. Now the second slide that I usually show is this one, and it's only because of my intelligence background, 20 years undercover operations with the CIA and the Russia division, to make sure that you know that everything that we're going to talk about tonight comes from open sources. And many of these examples I give you, I'll show you where I got the examples from, or you can ask me, but they're all open source. That's the point here. Sharia, Islamic law. By the way, when you say Sharia, that word alone means Islamic law. So you don't ever have to say Sharia law, because then that kind of sounds like you're stuttering. Sharia law. But that's where I learned. And I spent a lot of time doing my research. I read the Quran, I read the Hadiths, I read the Sirah Rasulullah, that is the biography of Muhammad. If he ever lived, we don't have any evidence that he did, but let's just say that he did. And of course, Sharia itself and books of law, which we'll go into a little bit as we go forth here. But so that's the point of this biography slide, to show you the background and how I learned what I hope to share with you tonight. So let's go to the next slide. What is Sharia, right? So Sharia is an Arabic language word, and it means the straight path to water. Now you can understand in a desert environment where Islam arose, the Arabian Peninsula as we call it today, that knowing how to find water would be absolutely critical to the communities that live there. So Sharia is a very important word. Now in English, Sharia corresponds not just to straight path to water, but meaning Islamic law. In other words, the straight path to God. God in Arabic is simply Allah. Allah is God in Arabic, like it's Dios in Spanish and Dieu in French and Bog in Russian, right? So the straight path to God is what Sharia means in English, Islamic law. Now, Islamic law is real law. It is based on a number of sources, primarily the Quran, but also the Hadiths, which are collections of the sayings and the doings of Muhammad, more or less, passed on down with some chain of passage, chain of acquisition, maybe accurate, maybe not. But in any case, there are many collections of hadiths, but there are 5 or 6 that are the major and authenticated collections of hadiths. And so Islamic law derives partly from that. And then, as I said, the Sirah Sirah Rasulallah, the biography of the Prophet of God. That's what that means. And then finally, a kind of an obscure source called Qiyas. And basically, Qiyas just means the analysis for Islamic law by the mujtahid, the scholars of Islam, but according to maybe new circumstances that might arise, like, what do you do with, I don't know, the use of technology in the 21st century, which they didn't have back in the 7th century. So in that situation, the scholars, that is the mujtahids, would analyze the situation and render a judgment on whether that was good Islamic law or how to fit that new circumstance into Islamic law. Okay, the next one. Sharia is obligatory. Obedience of Sharia is obligatory for all Muslims everywhere for all time, no exceptions. Now, that doesn't mean that they all do obey. I mean, obviously, in every faith, you've got slackers. There are Christians who don't go to church when they're supposed to. There are Jews who eat pork, marry outside of the faith. That sort of thing occurs in every faith. Although it's obligatory, let's just understand that many do not follow it. They call themselves Muslims, but they're not really. I'll give you a little bit of Arabic grammar. I've studied Arabic a little bit. And the word Islam is what you call a verbal noun. That is a noun that denotes an action, right? So Islam denotes the meaning is submission, a noun that denotes an action. And when you put an MU in front of a verbal noun in Arabic, you get the person who does that thing. So you put an MU in front of Islam, and what do you get? Muslim. And that very definition of the word means one who submits to Sharia. So the definition of what is a Muslim is contained in the word itself. But again, everybody doesn't obey. There are lots of slackers, lots of disobedience, and that's okay. May they prosper and multiply, actually. But it is real law nevertheless. And it is adjudicated, it's applied in Islamic courts that exist all over the world, including right here in the United States. Those Islamic courts in the United States typically and worldwide would be attached to something like an Islamic center. A mosque would just be a standalone place of worship and ceremony. But if you have Islamic center, that's a bigger facility, and it may include a court of law. It may include a madrasa or school. Sharia is taught in Islamic universities and madrasas all over the world, including right here in the United States. It's also written and explained in books which are available in English. The picture on this slide that I'm showing you is one that many of us find very useful, called Reliance of the Traveler, or the Umdat al-Salik in Arabic. It's useful because it's divided into very understandable chapters. There's a chapter, on every subject that you might be interested in. And it's very easy to follow and to look things up. That's why we like it. It's on Amazon. I think it's also online as a PDF, but check that for sure. Certainly as a book on Amazon and other book outlets. So that's why we like that one, or at least I certainly do. All right, let's look at the next slide here. And this one is Islamic doctrine on women and the Quranic references, the citations. Where does this come from? How they treat women. And we'll get more into the specifics of that shortly here, but you can get an idea right to begin with from this slide. So beginning first at the top there, in Islam, under Islamic law, there's no such thing as marital rape. A man can do whatever he wants, whenever he wants, with his wife or concubines, and there is no limit. There is no legal limitation on what he can demand from his wife, because literally she's his property. That is Islamic law. A woman is not married for love in Islam. She's married because she's bought and paid for, literally purchased. And so the man has the right to do whatever he wants. And let me just read that full quote there. 223 is what we're talking about. Let me find that one real quick because it's pretty egregious in my mind. All right, 2 verse 23. It says, "Your wives are as a tilth unto you, so approach your tilth when or how you will." Tilth basically means a field, like a farmer's field. Do whatever you want with your field. That's what that verse says. So there's no such thing as marital rape in Islam. In court, according to the Quran, a woman's testimony is worth half that of a man's testimony. Verse 2, Surah or chapter 2, verse 282. And what that says basically is that in a court of Islamic law, in terms of testimony, the word of 2 women is required to counter the testimony of a single man, worth half. Here's a verse from Surah 4, Surah 4 chapter, or Surah 4 verse 3. This regards polygamy. Within Islam, men may have up to 4 wives, and of course as many concubines or sex slaves as he would like to have. That's directly in the Quran, verse 4:3. In terms of inheritance, and here we have Quran, Surah 4, verse 11. It says very specifically that in terms of inheritance, the children of deceased parents, for example, that females get 1/2 that of the inheritance that a male would get. Verse 4, chapter 4, verse 34, in terms of beating. The verse says very specifically that if you even fear disobedience from your wife, not that she disobeys you per se, but if you fear disobedience from her, maybe sometime in the future, I don't know. It says basically, first admonish them, meaning, talk with them, remonstrate with them, then sleep apart from them, and finally beat them. Explicitly, it says beat them. So that's allowed too. Then we come to the subject of child marriage. You wonder why all across the Islamic world where Sharia is the rule of law, I mean, I can't figure this out for the life of me, why anybody would want to marry a child, but apparently they do. But its foundations are in the Quran itself in terms of the legality anyway. And here we have Quran chapter 65, verse 4. And it's talking about wives who have no courses. In other words, they haven't begun their menstrual cycles yet. That means it's a child, maybe 9 years old. And we know, of course, from the Sirah, the biography, as well as the Hadiths, that Muhammad supposedly married a child of 6 years old when he was in his 50s. I mean, I can't even imagine such an abomination, but that's what they do. And he did not, he waited though. I mean, he waited all the way until she was 9 years old to rape her, consummate the marriage. And that's the example of Muhammad. And so everybody copies that. Now, I don't know why anybody would want to, but they do. And finally, I'll just mention this one, the last on this page, because we have the example going on particularly right now in Iran, where very strict dress laws of how women are to dress in public are enforced with brutal violence. And where does it come from about covering, or at least, covering the head with a hijab? A hijab means a scarf. There are other kinds of covering. The great big tent that you wrap around you, that's called an abaya. In Afghanistan, we'll see some pictures of that in a bit. You'll see many of the women walking around in these mobile blue tents with little screens for their eyes to be able to see out. That would be called a burqa. So there are different kinds of coverings, but here's where it comes from. Surah 33, verse 59 is one of those. There are other places in the Quran as well, but that one says, uh, cast their outer garments over their persons that they may not be molested. That means if they don't cover up, they're asking to be raped. That's what that means. And they take it quite literally, especially in terms of those who are not Muslim, women who do not cover. They are assaulted, they're attacked, they're molested, and they're raped. Because why? Because the Quran says so. All right, next one. What is FGM? You may have heard of this. It stands for female genital mutilation. It's a horrific, brutal practice, literally of slicing out the clitoris of a little girl, and sometimes a lot more. It is obligatory. Yes, FGM is obligatory under the Shafi school of jurisprudence, that is in Sunni Islam. There are 4 schools of Sunni Islam. In the Shafi one, it says it's obligatory. In the other 3, the Hanafi, the Hanbali, and the Maliki schools of jurisprudence, again, Sunni side, it's either permitted or encouraged. Can you even imagine what kind of people would do this to little girls? Sometimes 6, 7 years old, little girls. Now, on the Shia side of Islam, there is at least one subsect that makes it obligatory also. That is called the Dawoodi Bohra, which belongs to the Ismaili sect of Shia Islam. You may remember a notorious case back in 2017 in Michigan, in which federal charges were actually brought against a doctor and a clinic, where it was alleged they were doing FGM on little girls. Unfortunately, because that federal law case was brought under a interstate commerce statute, it didn't really quite apply right, and the case was dismissed. Now, since then, there's been a lot of push across the United States to actually pass in each state and also at the federal level laws that would ban, outline, criminalize FGM in America. In 2020, for example, the Stop FGM Act was passed into federal law. And as of 2023, the latest I could find, 41 states have passed laws banning FGM. So all but 9 states make it illegal. And at the federal level, it is illegal now as well. The whole excuse for why they do this is we got to preserve female chastity. And if the females don't feel like engaging in relations with anybody, then they won't. But if the guy wants to, that's up to him. The guy can do whatever he wants. But the female has to be restricted so that she will remain uninterested, basically, in sexual relations for the rest of her life. That's what that's for. Okay, next slide here. What is honor killing? I'm sure you've heard of this as well. In Islamic culture, beginning in the Arabian Peninsula, but in Islamic culture all over the world, including right here in the United States, observant, that is observant, obedient, the most devout, practicing of Muslim Islamic families. In those families, the fathers, the sons, the brothers, the men, the males of the family, murder a female relative, their mother, their sister, their daughter, for perceived affronts to family honor. And that can mean just about anything they want it to mean. She didn't wear a hijab. She looked at a boy and smiled. It can be anything that you want, anything they want it to be. Now, where does this come from in terms of Sharia, in terms of Islamic law? Well, I look at the Reliance of the Traveler again, that green book I showed you. And in section O1.2, there is a list, and it says the following in this list are not subject to retaliation. In other words, not subject to legal consequences for your actions. And one of those is no consequence for a Muslim for killing a non-Muslim. There's no lawful, no legal case to be made against any Muslim who kills a non-Muslim. It's perfectly all right. But here's the important one for this slide for honor killing, and it's number 4 in the list. No consequence, no legal consequence under Sharia for a father or mother or their fathers or mothers, meaning grandparents, right, for killing their offspring or offspring's offspring. In other words, to kill your child or your grandchild is perfectly okay under Islamic law. Because why? Because the children are your property and you can do whatever you want with them, including kill them. I'll give a couple of examples, right? Well, one example in particular here. And back in January of 2008, very notorious case. It got quite a bit of publicity in the media. An Egyptian immigrant to Texas named Yasser Abdel Said, who was a taxi driver, shot his 2 teenage daughters to death in the back seat of his taxi because they had American boyfriends and wanted to be American teens. He went on the lam. He was not captured by law enforcement until the year 2000, 12 years later, brought to a court of American law, convicted and sentenced to life in prison without parole in 2022. But again, under Islamic law, what he did according to his law, Muslims don't recognize constitutional law, but according to his law and custom, what he did was perfectly legitimate because he had, in his mind, lost control of the girls who had, again, American boyfriends and just wanted to be American teens. He shot them to death. American law has consequences. Islamic law does not for that. All right, next slide. What is love jihad? If you've been reading our monthly newsletters of Women Under Sharia, you will have seen quite a bit of documentation of cases of what's commonly called love jihad. Well, what is that? Well, it's the kidnapping, the rape, the forcible marriage by a Muslim man of a non-Muslim girl or a woman. And where does the justification come in Islamic law for this? Well, Quran 4, chapter 4, Surah 4, verses 24, 25, and a number of others. I mean, Robert Spencer can rattle these off the top of his head. There are at least 3 or 4 of them, but I'll cite this one. And it talks about Muslim men may do whatever they want, including rape, of those whom your right hands possess. That means girls or women that you have taken forcibly in war, or it's always war when you're a Muslim and there are non-Muslim women and girls around you. It's always war. So you are, as a man, as a Muslim man, you are permitted to grab any one of them that you want, rape them, forcibly marry them, forcibly command them to convert to Islam because of this verse and several others about those whom your right hands possess. Now, note something here. Any child born of a Muslim father is by Islamic law, by Sharia, a Muslim. So there is the imperative, of course, to expand Muslim populations, and this is one way of doing it. And this love jihad, as it's called, unfortunately is prevalent in a lot of places, including Egypt and India, Pakistan, and now appearing all over Western Europe too, in places where they have foolishly allowed unchecked migration from places like these that allow uh, Muslim men to basically do whatever they want with non-Muslim women and girls. Um, all right, let's go to some more of the Quran and Hadith and the Sirah sources. Just some more that maybe I haven't noticed noted in the previous slides. Um, there are numerous references throughout Quran, Hadiths, and the Sirah to slaves, slavery, the institution of slavery, very much including sex slaves. I've listed a few here. And again, in the Quran, Muhammad is called the Ansan al-Kamil. And in English, that's Arabic, it means the perfect man. And so it is incumbent upon every Muslim male to emulate anything that Muhammad ever did. All of his reported actions, including marrying a 6-year-old, raping her at 9, taking sex slaves, all of that is absolutely not just an example of Muhammad. It is an example that Muslims are supposed to follow and emulate the actions, the behaviors, and all of his anything he ever said. A good source for you for looking up things like that by topic, slavery, sex slavery, that kind of thing. You might want to go to www.answeringislam.org. You can see that on the slide here. It's a very good website, English, which explains a lot of these different topics and where they come from, where the justification comes from for in Islamic law. And again, the final note here on this slide, it is legal for Muslim men who own slaves to use them sexually. That's just a given. It is not even thought about twice. It's absolutely a given. There's a couple of Quranic sources there that we can turn to for the justification. Okay, let's go to the next slide. And I'm going to start now giving you examples from different countries of how women are treated under Sharia in those countries. I'm going to begin with the Islamic Republic of Iran. Here we see the flag of Iran, a photo of the Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini, who, of course, we remember from the 1979 revolution. And it's a place where, since that revolution, some of the absolute worst abuses against women and girls have been perpetrated, are perpetrated to this day under the Iranian regime ever since 1979. That other photo there on the right side of the slide you see is just a snapshot of young co-eds, girls. I think there's some guys in the photo too. These are students, regular students at Tehran University, pre-1979. They look like co-eds and, college students anywhere in the world. Normal, regular kids attending college. Well, since 1979, the regime has imposed absolutely draconian dress code laws on the population, in particular on women, but men too. Men are told what haircuts they're allowed to have, not allowed to have, what T-shirts they can wear and not wear, ball caps, all of that. But for women in particular, the brutality includes arrest, jailing, rape, and murder. And that would be just for letting your hijab slip, maybe, and a lock of hair might slip out and become visible. We'll recall back in September 2022, that's now two and more years ago, the murder of the young Kurdish girl Mahsa Amini. She was riding in Tehran in her family car when apparently her hijab slipped and some of her hair showed under the hijab, the scarf, inside the family car driving on a street in Tehran. The so-called morality police stopped the car, dragged her out of the car, took her to prison, and bludgeoned her to death. That set off in Iran widespread, nationwide protests in every one of Iran's 31 provinces, in major cities, in universities all over the country. And the slogan of the movement was Zan Zendagi Azadi. That's Farsi for woman, freedom, woman, life, and freedom. Zan Zendagi Azadi. That movement continues to this day, I will say, with more and more girls and women in Iran disobeying the dress code laws and going out and about in public, even without a hijab. They are still accosted and arrested and jailed and raped and killed, but more and more are braving all of that and refusing to abide by the dress code. And so we'll see where that goes. But the younger generation will remember, knows nothing of life before that revolution. 1979, that's 40 something years ago, 45, 46 years ago. These young people today in Iran have no memory of what it was like under the Shah, under the monarchy. All they know is under this repressive regime, and they're pretty good at technology and internet linkages, and they can see how young people live in other parts of the world, and they want to be free like that too. All right, let's go to another place. Next slide. The Taliban Afghanistan. Here we see the photo of those blue burqas I was talking about. I mean, they cover these poor women from head to toe, and all they have this little mesh screen in front of their eyes so that they can see out, kind of, sort of. And that's the flag of Afghanistan there at the upper right-hand corner. Now, under Taliban rule, before 2001, the 9/11 attacks, and now again after the utterly irresponsible Biden administration withdrawal from Afghanistan in August of 2021, you'll see there that our new Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, is going after Mark Milley, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, in part for that, in part for other things. But in those times before 9/11, when Afghanistan was kind of on the road to modernizing, and young women attended college, kind of like the photos you saw of the Iranian girls going to school, going to college. The girls in Afghanistan under the Taliban before 9/11, and now again after 2021, they're not even allowed to go to school, period. They're not supposed to learn anything, because if they do, then they might not want to follow all the rules. So life for women and girls in Afghanistan then and now again, absolutely 7th century, if not worse. All these different abuses. Child marriage is absolutely common. Men buy little girls to be their wives. The burqa covering out in public, banning women, as I said, from education, from professional life, and even stoning under the law of Sharia. Again, I should say the stoning part was in Sharia previously. We know from the hadiths that stoning as a penalty for different things, adultery in particular, in particular for women, was in the Sharia, but then it was removed. So if you look for it today, no, it's not in the Sharia, but it was, and people remember that it was, at least reportedly, historically, and in Afghanistan, the Taliban still use stoning against women. Perhaps against men, but I haven't heard that so much against women. Every single bit of this that the Taliban are doing, sanctioned under Islamic law. They are the most devout, faithful, practicing, obedient Muslims on the face of the earth. That's what we Westerners have to get our heads around. They are not disobeying. These are the faithful ones. All right, next slide. Let's look at India, which, as you know, is today majority Hindu. That's the flag of India up there. In 1947, after the British colonial period ended, partition of the then British colony, the subcontinent, split what was then India into separate parts. Pakistan Pakistan that we know today, plus Bangladesh was part of it. It was called East Pakistan at that time. Later, that broke away. And then the subcontinent that we know of as India today remained mostly Hindu, and many of the Muslims migrated north. That passage, as Muslims went north in 47 and Hindus came south, horrific slaughter. That's another story. But India remained majority Hindu, but there are still quite a number of Muslims there. Now, according to 2024 statistics, Hindus make up around 80% of the Indian population. Muslims, we'll see only 14%, Christians barely 2 and a little bit more than 2%. However, those Muslims who remain in India routinely are attacking, assaulting Hindu women and girls. Love jihad, as you'll note from our newsletters, is a frequent practice of Indian Muslims against Hindu women and girls. India legally is a democratic republic. It is the leadership is elected. It's a secular state by its constitution. But again, the instances of so-called love jihad abound, as well as sexual abuse of minor girls by Muslim clerics in madrasas there. All that goes on. Okay, let's go to the next slide. I want to move along here so we have time for the Q&A. I'll go to Egypt here very quickly. The word Coptic it derives from how can I say this? A mispronunciation of the word Egypt, and instead of Egypt, Coptic, you see, it's the same word. The original population of Egypt, of course, goes back to Pharaonic times, right? But after the Christian era, Egypt was Christian in the majority. Egypt was mostly Christian. And only after the Islamic conquest, say in the 640s or thereabouts, 640s, current era, CE, did Islam take over Egypt. But so now, today, Coptic Christians or Copts are a distinct minority in Egypt among the population of 110 million Christians, maybe 10 to 15 million. They've either been exterminated, they have fled the country, or they have been pressured over the generations into accepting Islam, to converting. But what goes on to this day there, and you can read this most often, Raymond Ibrahim, you might know, is a wonderful scholar of Islamic law. He is a Coptic Christian from Egypt, here in America now, perfect English, of course, but writes a newsletter on a regular basis about these abuses, in which the Muslim men, very often they are kidnapping, raping, and forcibly converting girls and women to Islam and forcing them to marry their attackers. And then, because the judicial system is Islamic, they uphold that. They allow that. The judicial system allows that. In addition, churches, Christian churches, are bombed. They're not allowed to be repaired, rebuilt, or new ones built either. But the al-Sisi regime, that is of the president, Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, they pretty much ignore all this, and the police in Egypt refuse to protect the women. All right, let's move on here quickly. Next slide. Let's talk about Europe very quickly, because everything I'm just talking about in some of these places that are majority Muslim under rule of Sharia, that's flooding into Western Europe again, which foolishly has allowed in massive migration in places like Britain, France, Germany, Italy, of migrants who do not have any appreciation for the Christian, Jewish Christian heritage, primarily Christian, of Western Europe. And the sexual assaults have just absolutely skyrocketed by Muslim men against the the indigenous populations of these countries in Europe. A lot of this has been brought to the fore, to the attention most recently, because you may have seen in the United Kingdom, in Britain, Tommy Robinson, he's in jail now, of course, has fought for years to expose the so-called rape gangs. They call them grooming gangs. They're not grooming anything, they're raping. They are rape gangs by mostly Pakistani Muslim men against, British girls. But recently, Elon Musk, you may have seen this on social media, has taken to posting about this. And he is holding the British Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, to account for having ignored what is going on. So stay tuned to that in Britain. That is very much a topic, even though it's been going on for decades. It is finally getting public attention in the media. The police, over all this time, the politicians, they didn't want to talk about it because then they might be called racist or Islamophobic. But stay tuned, because that is finally getting some attention, again, because people like Tommy Robinson and also now Elon Musk have drawn attention to it. Okay, last two slides here. This one, conclusions and resources for you. We've cited a lot of the Quranic citations of where this material comes from, in terms of the chapters and the verses of the Quran, also citing Sharia, Islamic law. But look at this picture of the book up in the upper right-hand corner. That book is it's actually a paperback monograph size. It's called Islamic Doctrine versus the U.S. Constitution, The Dilemma for Muslim Public Officials, written by Dr. Stephen Kirby, published by the Center for Security Policy when I was still there, and I was still allowed to actually edit books in 2019. I was fired shortly after that. But in 2019, and you can find that book online, Amazon and other places where books are sold. But in conclusion, and to sum up, and what Stephen does in the book, he summarizes that Islamic law, Sharia, oppresses Muslim women and girls wherever it is prevalent, but of course non-Muslim women and girls targets too, as we have talked about. People will say the U.S. Constitution, the First Amendment, guarantees protection of certain liberties, and among these, of course, the first is freedom of religion. But however, I would make note that when the founding fathers, in particular James Madison, wrote these amendments, these articles of the Constitution, when they talked about freedom of religion, they were thinking of prayer, worship, devotion, maybe some dietary and fasting rules, maybe pilgrimage. That sort of thing is what the definition of religion was. It was not, when they wrote that amendment, it was not an entirely alien legal system, which is the definition of Islam. And Article 6 of our Constitution says that this is the supremacy clause, right? The U.S. Constitution and the laws derived from it shall be the supreme law of the land. So no, there is no protection for Islamic law, Sharia, under the First Amendment. The prayer, the worship, the diet, the fasting, all of that is totally protected, yes, but not the compulsory obligation to obey an alien system of law that is Islamic law or Sharia. And again, I'm citing Chris's website here, liberato.us, where we publish the monthly newsletter that I compile called Women Under Sharia. Okay, let me, oh boy, take a quick look at the clock here.